Welcome to Talking with Tech. My name is Rachel Madel, and I'm here as always with...
Am I Chris Bouguet today?
We're like doppelgangers. We switched our names. We took each other's work and we presented it as our name as somebody else's, Rachel.
This leads perfectly into what we want to talk about today, Chris.
Yeah, what's the topic? Rachel, what are we going to talk about?
So, Chris, this is going to be a little bit of a sensitive subject, but I think it's worth talking about because I think that it's something we've talked about off air, and we have the ability to reach thousands of people with our podcast. And so we want to talk about something that is really meaningful to us, and that is attributing other people's work when you are either presenting at a conference or on social media. There's been some situations where we have both together and separately, Chris, I feel like have experienced our work being, talked about, specific ideas or things that we feel like were our ideas, shared without attributing that they were from us. And I know this is something that a lot of people in the field who are presenting their work have experienced. I know it's not just us, but I wanted to talk about it because I feel like I never feel like it's done maliciously, but it affects us, right? As people who spend so much energy trying to, create presentations, to share on our podcast all of our ideas so openly and so freely, it really does not put a good taste, in my mouth when I'm like scrolling social media and I see something that I know was in one of my courses or, was on the podcast and it just wasn't attributed.
Yeah, that is a very sensitive subject, and you are right. I mean, I've talked to a lot of presenters, people that do what we do when we present, and they've had similar experiences. I know one person once told me they went into a presentation because they were interested in the topic, and it was their exact slide deck that was actually, that one was probably, again, not malicious, but maybe people just didn't know, like, oh, I didn't know that I was supposed to attribute this. I like to lean on that. I will also be the first to admit that I have been called out for sharing other people's materials and not citing them the right way, like putting the dates on them or putting the names right next to them. And so I've tried to get, I always think I attribute it to the people that were presenting, but trying to be more diligent about the academic way of sharing that. But yeah, it's an interesting topic because I think people just don't know. They don't know that they should attribute. I do want to call out somebody who did it right. So Sarah Gregory, we'll call her out specifically. Hi, Sarah, and we know you listen. Sarah Gregory wanted to attribute the specific language system first approach that she heard me and you talk about here, and she wanted to attribute to the work I've done. And she asked me, she said, Chris, where's the first place that this was published? How do I cite it? What's the right way to share this information? And it was like, yes, this is the way to do it. And if I ever fail to do it, this is what I strive to do. I want to strive to do what Sarah did, and that is to attribute where you heard the information and give credit to that person.
I'm going to shout out Jill Center because the same thing happened with me for Inspire Don't Require. She reached out to me and she was like, where was this first, like, I heard this phrase from you, where was it first published? And I was like, she's like, do you have a blog I can link to? And it ended up that I ended up writing a blog for USAC on that exact topic. But I really appreciated it. And it's really nice when somebody reaches out and asks, like, where can I drive people to the place that this was first mentioned, or what podcast episode was this on? It's just like, it's such a nice thing to hear because we spend a lot of time and energy sharing so freely, and it's just like, and again, I don't think it's malicious. I think it's just like people don't think about it. And to be fair, like some things like we all kind of talk about, right? Like we're all talking about core words. Like we're all talking about aided language input. Some things are just like, we all kind of present on and make sure that everybody understands in the AAC world. But it's more the specific things, like the specific ideas that aren't being talked about widely, because that's when it's like, you see it and you're like, that looks like mine. And it's like when I'm saying that, like I want to see my name attached to it. And like I said, a lot of people are really great. People tag me on social media. People are like, I heard this from Rachel Madon. I heard this on the Talking with Tech podcast. Awesome. Love it. It's just like those certain situations where I'm like, oh, how rude.
There's a little bit of a gray area in between what you were just mentioning there that I think is worth bringing up. And that is, like you said, if it's super specific, then yes, you can attribute it maybe right back to one person. But when it's more general, it's a little bit harder to do. And, that spectrum of specific to general, there's a gray area in between. So for instance, I feel like we're living in it a little bit right now with coaching. We're not the only people that talk about coaching. There's other people that talk about coaching. Do you attribute coaching to one particular person in the field of AAC? I don't know that you can, Is there a specific approach or outline or design to that coaching? I don't know. It's this gray area because, and when I think about my own knowledge about how I've come to learn about coaching, I've mentioned the story. I mentioned it in a previous banter about the motivational interviewing. Like I learned about it in one way, and then I grew from. And there wasn't just I learned about it. Boom, here, this was the place, and now I can cite everything back to this place. It's a cloud of information that has formulated what I know and what I'm sharing.
Yeah, and I think that makes it a little bit more complicated, and sometimes we learn things without knowing where we learned them from. I've definitely been in that situation. I'm like, okay, I know I learned, this wasn't my idea, but like I learned about it, and like I can't exactly find out who I found it from. I also think that there's a lot of sharing that's done on social media, and that's where it's really prevalent, I think. Like, I think if you're sharing something in a professional setting, in a presentation, like, people, like, kind of think, like, oh, cite your sources. Like, okay, I'm going to cite this research and this and that. But I think on social media, it's, like, it's more of, like, a free-for-all. So people are, like, sharing quotes and sharing all these things. And I just don't think they always think to cite the sources. And I think that there's some concepts, like, for example, I was on social media, a month or so ago, and I saw this really awesome quote that's from a famous research article. And I was like, and I like messaged the person and I was like, hey, like, just so you know, like, this is like a really well-known research article in AAC, and like, you should cite it. And also, like, you should cite it because obviously the authors spent a long time doing amazing work that was so good that we ended up quoting it over and over and over again. But also it gives people a place to keep learning and to read the whole article, right? To learn more. And so anyway, I reached out to this person and they were like, oh, of course, like, I didn't know. And of course, I'm like, I didn't think it was like on purpose, like you weren't citing it, but it's just like things like that where I think we need to just like try to trace back where we heard something, or to try to find if there's research to support, whatever it is that we're posting or talking about.
So in those situations, it's really clear, like, cite, right? The gray area, and I think this is what people will struggle with, and I think we have to give some people some advice here. Like, we have to consult right now, Rachel, and that is, there could be people listening, and I've certainly had this my own thought here. Well, I just won't share it. Like, I just won't post. If it's going to be a big deal, or someone could possibly twist it into a big deal. I mean, one, I don't want the drama, but two, I don't want any litigious action, to take place. So I'm safer not posting. And if I'm safer not posting, that means I'm safer not sharing. And if I'm not sharing, the needle's not moving, or it's moving a lot slower. And so people are caught in this quandary of, so I just might not share because I don't want the drama and I don't want to take the chance of possibly offending somebody by not citing them. And what are your thoughts on that, about just not sharing?
Yeah, and I think that kind of, like, we can talk about that in the scope of, like, our field, but also even broader than that. I think, like, we're, like, so hyper connected with social media that, like, it does feel like, and because everything's so polarized, like, politically, and, there's so many things that, like, it is easier to not share because, like, you don't know if you'll offend somebody or something, will be misconstrued. And so I think it's this balancing act where we have to do the best we can to try to, attribute, like, if we found ideas from someone else. And I I think that as on the opposite end, like people whose work is being, presented out there in the world, we just need to assume, I always assume that people didn't know. I assume like, okay, like they just didn't know, and so then the question is like, do I say something? Do I not say something? And so it depends on the situation. I've done both. I've been like, whatever, it doesn't matter. And I've also been like, I'm going to say something in obviously a kind way that's just like, hey, just so you know. I also think that as presenters of our work, we can also help other people out. So I've had people, Sarah Gregory's a great example actually, like at one point, I think Inspire Don't Require was circling around Facebook. She was like, I love that quote from Rachel Madel. And so it's like when we notice things that other people have presented on, it's like, oh yeah, in case anybody's wondering, here's this citation. So I think we can help each other out in those ways. But if we're thinking about like, what's the safest bet as far as like presenting an idea? I don't know. I think just being kind of more cognizant when you're creating resources and social media posts and things like that as to like, where did I actually get this from? And it could be as simple as like, I learned this at ATIA or some conference, right? Like it doesn't have to be the specific person, but if you know that like I just went to ATIA, it was awesome, and I got this idea. Of course, if you could like, shout out the presenter or whoever like gave you the idea, great. But I think it just shows that like I'm making an effort to say this isn't mine. Because I think that that's the hard part as like someone who looks at a piece of content and says like, they're acting as if it's their idea and everyone's liking it and sharing it. And I'm like, but that's mine. That's my idea. And of course our ego gets involved too, right, Chris? Like as the presenter, like sometimes we have to check our ego and we have to remember that like, it's valuable information that's being shared. And so like, it doesn't matter if my name's attached to it. So it's like this balancing act. I'm like trying to check my ego at the door. I'm like, it doesn't matter, Rachel, people are benefiting from the information. It doesn't matter if your name's attached. But the other side of me is like, hey, like I want my name to be attached. Like I worked hard for that. So it's this balancing act that we have to do, but I think we have to come at it with grace, both with ourselves and with other people, and just assume that they didn't know and that it wasn't malicious, because I think that we get into trouble when we like start attacking people. Like, I don't think that helps anybody. And I've had really good conversations with people who like just didn't know, and then now they know. And so now they're going to be more cognizant the next time they create something for social media or present something, to the world.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ways. There's the idea that I didn't know because I didn't know I should be citing it. I didn't know I should be giving attribution. That's one. But then there's the other thing is I really did think I came up with this on my own. I didn't realize that it was part of this amalgamation of learning from other people, and that I did hear that from you, or actually I heard it from somebody else. And they may have mentioned your name when they said it, but that's not the part that stuck. The idea was the part that stuck, that really resonated with me. And I took that little part and I infused it to what I'm doing over here. And so now I'm presenting on it, and I didn't realize that there was this domino effect of what is impacting you. I also think something that you said that was really important was when you as a presenter stumble across someone else sharing an idea that originated from you, or at least you believe it originated from you, what you do about it. Sometimes you say something and sometimes you don't. I tend to lean on the same thing you do, which is what I heard you say, which is like, occasionally I'll say something if I can feel like it's right and not do it, but it often feels so, I don't know, arrogant, like to go, that was, so I tend to not, I tend to just be like, no, the world is moving in the right direction, and we're making the world a better place. They're sharing an idea, be flattered about it, and move on. You'll have other ideas, It's not like you're losing hundreds of thousands of dollars on this great idea. Do you know what I mean? It's not about that, So I feel like it's a good topic to talk about. I feel like we've touched on a lot of sensitive information, and I think maybe the big takeaway is to try and be cognizant of where you got your information.
Yeah, because I also think that perhaps someone who doesn't dedicate a lot of time and energy to presentations and sharing their work, might not really understand from the presenter side it's like blood, sweat, and tears go into our work, you know, like we are just like spending so much of our energy and our time, like trying to curate experiences and think of these ideas. Like, you know, it's like I sit down and think hard about like, how can I like improve my practice and share it with people in a way that like resonates and like empowers them, you know? And so it's just like being cognizant of that, I think, is hopefully the goal of this short little banter for this episode. And I'm really excited that we talked about it because I feel like it's been on my mind, and I'm sure there's going to be people listening who are like, yes, I feel the same way, or wow, I didn't even know, like I'm going to be really cognizant of this, you know, moving forward. It's also just a really great way to connect with other people in our field. When somebody is like, oh my gosh, I loved this quote from Rachel Madel, I like feel connected to that person. I'm like, wow, I'm so happy that like I was able to impact you in that way. And, you know, I'll follow them on social media, I'll follow them back, and, you know, I'll do all those things. And so it's just like, it's kind of like sharing is caring. Like sharing is caring, and we can all do this together, and we elevate each other when we share each other's work and we tell people where we got it from. And so I think that's kind of the take-home message.
So I think my take-home message would be that sharing is caring. You heard it here first. Chris Bouguet, quoted by me. Nobody else can take it.
Listen, if I see you post on Twitter, sharing is caring, I'm going to be really upset.
I already did it. It's already out there.
It's already been tweeted.
Too late, Rachel.
All right. What's our interview today, Chris?
Our interview is with Nikki Stempien, and it's not really an interview, it's a coaching call. And because we had such a good time talking to Nikki, we actually ended up doing a two-parter. So this is part one of our coaching call with Nikki Stempien.
Are you enjoying this episode? We would love for you to take a few minutes to hit the subscribe button so you always know when we release new content. Even better, if you leave us a review on iTunes, then more people will find this podcast and learn about AAC. We also love reading your reviews on air. Thank you so much for your support. We love this community. Now we can head back into the episode. Welcome to Talking with Tech. I'm your host, Rachel Madel, joined today by Chris Bouguet and Nikki Stempien. We're doing a coaching call today, and I'm really excited to have you here, Nikki.
Thank you. I'm super excited too. This is like exciting. And I said it before, but appreciate you guys taking time to chat with me and help me out.
Amazing. So yeah, let's dive in. I think you have a lot of questions for us, and hopefully we can help guide you to some solutions.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a student, her eligibility is autism spectrum disorder, and she's in 6th grade. And so she is new to me as a speech therapist on my caseload, but not necessarily the rest of her team. Meaning by that, I mean, like, we had a therapist quit over Christmas break, and I just picked her up on my caseload mid-year. And so everyone else she's working with, her teachers, all related services are already familiar with her, which has been helpful in like gathering background information for sure on her. But I just kind of feel like things are going in a lot of different directions with her, and trying to figure out, which one to go with, or putting the pieces together, or whatever analogy, and so yeah, just kind of, there's a lot of different background information on this. So what I can kind of fill you in on, and what I've gathered in 2 weeks since I've started collecting information on this student, is the previous therapist was trialing some communication apps with her. And by trialing, I kind of mean like she has her ISD issued iPad that she brings with her to therapy. And then during that therapy, different apps, and then kind of just seeing how she interacts and engages, and that kind of modeling and things like that with her with it. Based on her therapy notes, what I can kind of gather is she's kind of, since September, she's been kind of writing stuff down and kind of gathering that she's kind of going in the direction of like a touch chat application. Seems to be something she was looking at the best. However, maybe unfortunately, there's a lack or just not the best communication, it appears, between, kind of what she was working on and figuring out and like other members of the team for this student. We have like an ASD consultant type team in our county, and when I kind of sat down to chat with them to get information, just kind of seemed really out of the loop on the fact that she was trialing different things with her. And from their perspective, nothing, air quotes, nothing was being done because there wasn't something already in place that was functional for this student. And just somewhere there was a disconnect that she was working on it, I guess, within the team. So they kind of implemented a PECS-like system, but like not following the steps and initiation and traveling and discrimination, those kinds of things. Like, I guess they give her like a sentence strip with an I want picture and then some like choices of things she could say. A lot of just like school choices though, like I want to go to the bathroom, I want to take a walk, things she would need to say, but not necessarily like her most desired preferable items, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And from their perspective, that's something that's, starting to work for her. But when just a couple of times I've had the opportunity to sit down with her and just kind of like seeing what she would do with that without any prompting, it was like it wasn't even there. So I'm not sure how established that really is. But they're trying, and they're, trying to get her something. It's also kind of included in like a big binder that's kind of mixed with more receptive type things like visual schedules. And so it's all kind of combined in one, which that was maybe a little bit kind of confusing maybe for the student. And then the other kind of direction or piece is that I called mom, of course, introduced myself, got her perspective and background and information. Mom reports that 4 or so years ago, the student had an iPad with LAMP on it that was gifted to her through a program, but it was a lot of like the student mom's words were like engage with it or didn't really do anything with it. It was a lot of, having it follow her rather than her bringing it with her, and it got left outside and lots of things. And it was damaged not too long after they had it, and it just wasn't ever replaced or fixed. Mom mentioned the app Acorn, which I had heard of it, but wasn't super familiar with it. So I kind of took a look at it. All I had access to was the free version, but I have some reservations with that app. But I'm trying to consider like the parent buy-in and all that piece to it too. But she didn't seem like she wasn't open to something else. But that was kind of the thought she was going to. And it does seem like she kind of has that maybe negative perception of LAMP now because of, the past experience with that. Mm-hmm. And I have personally sat down and seen her 3 times now. Just had the opportunity. And the first time was really just like, here's a bunch of fun things that I think you might like, and just kind of building that rapport and stuff, which I had the device out and was modeling, of course, but, and I wasn't really sure, but I chose to kind of just pop up the touch chat because that's kind of what the therapist kind of indicated before. And I was kind of excited. The very first time that we really kind of dove into it, I had like a bucket of animals because she's really interested in animals. And I just happened to have like a little cheetah that you can like pull back and let it go and it zips across the floor, Yeah. And was modeling Go on the app often, obviously. And she didn't really do it herself a couple of times, actually, but not a whole bunch at first. So she was actually verbally saying ready, set, go a couple of times, which is kind of cool. But then the second time when I saw her and I had that, the bucket of animals on the table kind of to the far side, and then I had the iPad out with touch chat up, and she sat down and she looked at the bucket of animals and she looked at touch chat for like 10 seconds or so, and she pushed go on it. And to me, that was indicating like she wanted that cheetah so we could play that Go game again, So like, it's been very little time, but I was pretty excited about that, and I actually got her to use, she used want a couple of times then throughout the session after that too, like, did you want a turn? I was modeling all of that, and she kind of did it 3 or 4 times independently too, right after I modeled it. So I just feel like I said, I have all these different places and pieces, and I'm kind of like, I'm not sure where to go from here. Like, it kind of, to me, feels like touch tab, but I want to kind of include the whole team on it. Do I like kind of start with one, I've been listening to all the podcasts, so I start with like the big whole meeting and go through and write the list down, but then I feel like I have the data to kind of support that. I'm just kind of like, which way do I turn now? kind of thing. And yeah, so that was kind of a lot, but
Well, listen, Nikki, you gave us a really thorough case history. So that's the good thing. The other good thing is you are really trying to adopt a team approach to this student, and you're already light years ahead of a lot of other clinicians who are kind of doing their thing in their silo. So the fact that you've got so much input from all of the team members is super valuable, right? So now it sounds like you're having a hard time trying to figure out and synthesize all the inputs that you're getting, and then, determine a potential solution for this student. Yes?
Yes, 100%.
Nikki, a couple clarifying questions. So I had a hiccup in my internet when you were talking about the negative experience around LAMP. Can you just reiterate that again? What happened? You tried to install or tried to use it and it didn't work, or what was the details there?
Yeah, so just 4 or so years ago, before myself or even the other therapist that just got done working with her, had the student on their caseload, she was gifted. There's like a program around us that you can apply for, and students on the spectrum can receive an iPad with LAMP on it, specifically the program. And they had applied and they had gotten that. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but I had gone back through our online IEP system and looked and could, if there were any notes or progress on anything like with that. I didn't see any indication that they were even using it in the school, but the therapist at that time is long gone from our ISC and everything now. But so I didn't see anything indicated in school, but it just kind of sounded from mom's report that at home, she just wasn't interested in, or she wasn't engaged with it, is how mom worded it. She I don't know how much mom was taught as far as modeling and all of that. But basically it just sounded like she didn't use it, and she wouldn't take it with her places, and they were just falling around. It was always getting left places.
Yeah, I think that's probably not necessarily LAMP. That's probably any AAC tool that if no one's really teaching them how to use it, or you press the buttons a few times and then it gets left behind. That's not atypical for any system.
Mm-hmm.
A couple other clarifying questions. So in your neck of the woods, is 6th grade the sort of the grade that you you're in a new building? Do you know? Meaning,
yeah.
So the whole team is new for her, like the new teachers, everybody's new.
Since the beginning of the school year, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We came back.
And has it been? Yeah, it's been in person.
For the most part, there was a 2-week period where this particular school went virtual. But other than that, they've been in person the whole school year.
All right, cool. Year. And does the student have any sort of vision issues or fine motor difficulties? We can rule that kind of stuff out, right?
Correct. Yep. She doesn't have any of those difficulties.
Okay. Can you talk about her literacy at all? What's her experience there?
From kind of teacher report, she will, how does she explain it? The teacher kind of takes sight words, which, I kind of explained her the other, end up being core words too. But the teacher will kind of read it out loud, and she'll mostly imitate it. So she's not reading, but she also doesn't have anything like AAC to kind of demonstrate other than verbally what she knows or can do. So the teacher will read something out loud and point to the letters, and sometimes very inconsistent and get a percentage, but she will imitate some of the words that the teacher is doing, but that kind of seemed like the extent.
And that kind of leads me to the last question. You're starting to refer to it there, is that Given the fact that she does not have a lot of experience with AAC or using a consistent approach to AAC, what would you say her primary form of communication is now to make her wants and needs known?
Gestures, or kind of the pictures are a little bit. Mom, I didn't forget to mention this. Mom reported at home that they will have pictures on their fridge, mainly for like food preferences, and she won't exchange it like the PEX type system, but she will like go up to the fridge and point if she wants chocolate milk. But she has, it sounds like maybe like 5 to 10 pictures on that she does that with. So some discrimination though of some, symbols and pictures are there. So
I lied. I have another question. Sorry.
That's okay.
You started to describe like mom being home. What else does the family look like?
Okay, so maybe I should have mentioned this too. All these things, I told you there's a lot. She has 2 or 3, I can't remember for sure, other sisters who are also on the spectrum, autism. I asked Mom what that looked like as far as if anybody else was using devices at home. The oldest, 1 or 2, I'm forgetting if there's 2 older and then 1 younger or just 1 older, but the oldest one is pretty verbal. So that wasn't something that was needed. And the youngest one is kind of almost in the same boat, if anything, a little less verbal than my student. As far as not even like kind of the echolalia or imitating, but nothing's in place for her either. But she's at a different school and I'm not sure. I haven't looked into yet like what another therapist is doing with her, but Mom said there's not any other form of like devices or anything like that at home.
And that's a younger sibling.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. So you've given a really awesome picture of what this student looks like. I feel like I know this student from all of your thorough descriptions and all of the interviewing that you've done with the whole team. Given the question about literacy, right? Because we're not really sure what the student's literacy is, and you said it yourself, because they don't have access to an AAC system to be able to show us that, right? So given that baseline, is there any systems that we were considering that you could potentially eliminate from the list because of lack of literacy capacity?
Well, that was one of the reasons I wasn't really sure about that Acorn app. I only have access to the free version, so I kind of looked up on like the App Store, but I could not see anywhere that like they don't have a keyboard, that from what I can tell. So there would be that, and it just, other things. But as far as the literacy aspect of it, that's kind of was one of the things. I didn't see how there was like an actual keyboard on that app. So I would cross that one out.
Okay, I like it. And that's important. I mean, I think I can speak for Chris and I, and we would say we would cross it out too. An AAC system that doesn't support literacy, in my opinion, is not robust enough for students to learn. And so, whenever I'm thinking through the lens of like, okay, here are the different, features I need for an AAC system, that's a huge one on the list, right? Because we can only anticipate so much of what a student will want to say. If we don't give a system that supports literacy, then we really don't give the tools to support independent, autonomous communication. Because again, we can only program so much. We can't anticipate every single thing that a individual is going to want to say.
Yeah, and that was definitely one of my feelings towards not wanting to go that route. But I also just didn't know if I just wasn't exploring it or anything. Like, I didn't know if it could be programmed that way, or, because I have played with it all of like a handful of times, at this point since the last 2 weeks. So that is kind of good to know that I just didn't not figure that app out.
Well, Nikki, something I really like what you were saying was the idea of trying to pull the team together and making that list of considerations. Because what it sounds like from the way you describe the situation is that different tools have been thrown at the situation without any or much collaborative consideration about which tool we should be applying. So that list of considerations, I think, is going to be huge. With that in mind, what do you think would go on that list?
Well, definitely the touch chat app. I mean, LAMP is definitely a possibility too.
let me stop you there. Even so, those are sort of if you picture this table in your mind, right? That those would be like maybe column 2 and column 3 because you're listing the tools. But column 1 would be what do you want the student to be able to do? What would be the functions of the tool? Like Rachel already mentioned literacy. We want to write that in column 1. You know, something that supports literacy. What would be some other things you might put in that first column for the student?
Core words. And that's kind of like what you mean. Yeah. So core words, word prediction, which kind of goes with like the keyboard and the literacy, the motor planning, of course.
Yep.
Those are like the ones that are like really popping out to me right now.
Totally. And do you think if you met with the team, including mom, you could facilitate that sort of conversation where they were filling out that first thing? Because I could see potentially, and I don't want to put words in mom's mouth here, but something that could work for more than one of my kids. Do you know, something that I could easily support and learn how to use?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think the teachers would say in that first column?
Independence, maybe, like what is she going to be able to do independently? Just kind of thinking back to like the pitcher type system, as I know that kind of is a little bit more like kind of hand over hand type fronted, at least kind of initially. So maybe just her being a little bit more independent in that, or I guess maybe, you know, her initiating. Something that I had another thought on that, that they, maybe that's, I mean, not that they want to try something new, but that's maybe something that's familiar or easy to them too. I say that because LAMP just seems to be something that's pretty common in our county and within our ISD and everything. So there's a lot of teachers who are most familiar with that one. But again, I feel like the feedback and support I've gotten from everyone else that they think they would be willing to try something else though, but.
I'm curious what you think that the ASD consultant would say. Because I am, from what you said, they're trialing a picture-based system. So what do you think that they would include on that list?
I think just something kind of with the independence and functional aspect too. I think the biggest thing that when I met with them kind of previously to get the information is they seemed very hesitant for me to just kind of say, let's just not go that route, the picture route that they were kind of starting, because they felt like it was something that they had in place and that she was using. And I kind of like had mentioned, well, if she's doing that, if she's creating a sentence that says, I want to go to the bathroom on her own, then as we transition her to a more robust system, then you could still model it on the device, like the want, or, you know, and not how, whatever we decide is the modeling, and then like not do it as an expectation for her to say it, but to kind of transition her. And they were really like on board with that. So I think maybe just like completely taking away like what they felt was working wasn't something that was going to get them on board, but like using it as a transition tool is something they would be really open to. So I think they would be on board with going another route, but I think it's got to be like a nice little transition for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, when you're thinking about like any type of new technology or new AAC or new anything for that matter, like, yes, like everybody needs like some time to get used to a new system. We would never want to take a system away that, you know, a student knows and uses or a team knows and uses, but we can add in, right? We can add in a more robust system to make that transition a little smoother. And I think you nailed it, Nikki. Like, it's like you're trying to really think through the lens of like, how can I get this whole team bought in, which we know is the most important thing, but also the most difficult thing, right? Because everyone's like, I think it should be this, and I think it should be this, and I'm already doing this, right? And so you're really thinking through that lens, like, how can we get everybody on board with a more robust language system?
Yeah, I'm trying. I learned it all from talking with tech podcasts on my drive to work. So
We're happy to hear that.
I don't know if you could tell, Nikki, but Rachel and I are sitting here smiling from ear to ear because it's like you're saying all the stuff, like what you're doing. You've nailed it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I've learned it, I think, and this is like the first time I feel like I'm starting, because I've had students before with AAC and, high communication needs, but like I kind of was already in the midst of working with them when I started kind of listening to the podcasts. But this is kind of like the first time where I'm being able to start kind of fresh, if you will, and kind of like, okay, I want to make sure I do all the things in this case. So
all the things.
Yes.
Nikki, the student, because in middle school, typically they're moving from class to class. Does this student move from class to class? What does the inclusion look like, or is it mostly self-contained?
She has 2 general ed teachers, and between the 2 general ed classrooms and the special education teacher, I say she's probably in schedule. I'm still learning her schedule. It looks like she's kind of in general ed more than her special ed classroom, probably 60 or 70% of the time between the 2 classrooms. She does have a one-on-one aide with her at all times, 2 different ones, a morning one and an afternoon one. So they're part of the team. But yeah, she's in a lot of general ed classrooms. I haven't gotten too much into like what that looks like for her. Like I haven't necessarily observed her in her classroom for a prolonged period of time. I have seen like her there, like her desk is usually kind of not completely like off to the side, but a little bit more like maybe back row corner type, just because of like when she's echolalia or her, different sounds and things like that. But she's still, as far as, I'm being told by everyone, like included in discussions and things, but just a lot of more receptive answers or, receptive ways to engage her rather than expressive.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, right? Because we're working on figuring out what that expressive way is going to be. So let me ask you this: in the environment, you had already mentioned that Lamp Words for Life is something that in your area people are familiar with, but in the specific school that the student is going to be in for the next handful of years, will probably transition to the next school with all the same students, around her. Is there any other communication device users?
Primarily if they are, which higher level, not in those gen eds that I'm aware of. I'm not the therapist in those buildings. Actually, even in the school she's at, she's the only one on my caseload because the rest of the students were moved to, they go into a room at the school and then they see the therapist virtually. But I was just told the student that wasn't something that was going to be best practice for her. So I'm going to the school for the one student. So if there are, I'm not aware of them. And this one was specifically, the student was specifically, pointed out as that one at work and no others were. So I'm going to assume that that's not the case. There are others as far as, but not in a program that she would be looking to go into, if that makes sense. More different self-contained classrooms that there are many of those users with, or many AAC users in, but we want to be transitioning her there.
So if whatever the system that is selected, and it's then implemented in the classroom, it'll be new for everybody, new for all the students in the room, new for the general ed teachers, even the special ed teachers. Are they familiar with the system at all?
I think the special ed teacher she wouldn't know how to like model and those kinds of things, but she's heard of it and looked at it before type thing, but no like training or anything like that. The ASD team has a little bit more involvement with the LAMP specifically, but not really other apps, at least to my knowledge. And that would kind of probably be about the extent of it.
I have a question. What do you think, or who do you think would be the biggest roadblock to implementing a more robust system?
That's an interesting question. I mean, like I said, I feel like Mom seemed like she was open to something besides Acorn, but that's just the only thing I'm kind of, a little bit worried about is she just might feel that it wouldn't be engaging with her for her, which is how she pointed at lamp out in the past. So maybe Mom, but I'm not trying to say that she's not going to get on board by any means, but that would probably be my assumption as the biggest.
Mm-hmm. And did she explain to you the rationale behind Acorn?
Because the student really likes like iPad games in general. She's really engaged with games, and she felt like it was kind of game-like, so it was more engaging. And I think maybe but this was something that I wasn't so sure about of it. It's just kind of like the sounds and the things that kind of go along with it she calls it engaging and exciting, but to me they're just a little bit trying to think of like a good word for it, maybe youthful, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Rachel.
No, you go.
Well, just a comment on that is that, with my own kids, my own experience when it comes to apps for any kid, games and things like that are always initially engaging. Mm-hmm. Anything that's like moving things around and it's fun, engaging, the novelty wears off. And one of the nice things about games is that there's billions of them. So you can move on. Like if I were to think of my own kids and the kids that I know in schools, they play with games. They have a shelf life of 6 months. And then at most, if you listen to the podcast, we've talked about Among Us, right? Who's talking about Among Us now?
Yes. Old
right?
news.
It's old news. Exactly. So I wouldn't want to pick it just on the I want the longevity to outweigh the engagement piece because it'll be temporary.
Right.
If that helps Mom.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point to bring to her for sure.
Nikki, are you able to have a team meeting where because you've done a lot of individual conversations with the whole team, are you able to collect everyone together at a set time to discuss?
I mean, I sure could try.
No, so easier said than done, right?
Yeah, I mean, I did all together with the AAC team, the special ed teacher, and then she also received social work services one morning when I was collecting all the information. So I would just really need to add in general ed teachers, Mom, and her 2 aides. It kind of seemed like, before, which this is just a little bit tricky with the aides, not that they're not wonderful people, but when you look at contracts and hours, out of school times can sometimes be a challenge. But I mean, I could definitely put feelers out and include as many people as possible.
And are you able to trial some of this technology? I know you're trialing it during your sessions, which is awesome. And I would definitely recommend keep trialing it, keep collecting data, because that's going to be really useful in a team discussion. But are you able to trial a system, more comprehensively with a student in the classroom, with the teachers, before there's a final decision that's made?
Yeah. So you mean like me working directly with her during it, like go into the classroom rather than a individual setting? Well,
just having access to the device more consistently than just during your sessions. So is it possible to set up a trial in the classroom so that like the device stays in the classroom? Yeah. So that was kind of like the next direction I'm wanting to go, is like her have it all times. But I guess I wasn't sure if like we should wait until like we've decided on the app to do that, or you know what I mean? So yeah, definitely. I also wasn't sure like how much I should like teach or coach the team first before just being like, here you go. You know what I mean? Like I felt like maybe I should be a degree of training first, and I wasn't really sure like how in depth that should look too. Before, but yeah, so I definitely wanted to be with her access at all times, but that was kind of like the next piece of like, I wasn't really sure how that looked.
So that Nikki, I think that is an excellent segue, because here's what I think the steps might be, right? Is that you, just what Rachel was kind of suggesting, pull everyone together, as many as you can. You then have that meeting and you make a decision. And then you get the thing and you start implementing it. And that leads us to that kind of next question is, now what does implementation look like so that no one bails on it 3 months down the road? Oh, that's not working. Let's try something else. Do you know what I mean? Because that'll come up unless there's really good thought out approach to what implementation is going to look like and the support for that implementation. So what do you think that would be?
So I guess like I was kind of thinking, do I need to like train them all individually first or all as a team, but I didn't know like if we were doing it with the student, probably smaller chunks at a time, because it just would seem overwhelming to me if I were the student to have all these people in here at once. Or kind of like maybe you said, just even going into the classroom and modeling it with maybe even just the aides at first, because they're the ones with her all the time. And then kind of going to the special ed teacher after that, maybe. And I don't know, like I wasn't sure do we do it all at once or do we do steps?
Well, I have a question. Is there any activity that you are seeing success with in your therapy room that you could transition to the classroom? Or a word, perhaps. Maybe it's not an activity, but it's a word that you mentioned go. She really liked that toy that you had. Is there any way that you could transition that into the classroom and, target that?
Yeah, the go maybe seems easier because I haven't spent enough time in the classroom to know, like, I feel like the toy type activity might be a disruption to the class part of it, but go, I mean, she's using or being prompted to use like go to the bathroom or go to your next class, or do you need to go, anytime she moves, do you need to go get a tissue, whatever, like, yeah. So maybe just have them model like a word of the week type thing. At least that's what their focus is, not that they can't model other things, but kind of that kind of a focus.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense because there's lots of opportunities for that specific core word. And it sounds like, I'm sure they're already saying that word, right? It's time to go to lunch. It's time to go to the bathroom. We're already using that word. So how can we model language? One thing that like first popped into my mind though, is, with a student who has been kind of through the gamut of AAC, right? It's like we tried this and this person tried this and that person tried this and everyone's tried all these different things. And it sounds like no one's really had a lot of meaningful success with all these systems. I think you have to be very careful about the kinds of activities that you're choosing to use with a device. So for example, if we, bring that device into a classroom, so let's just kind of go down this thought for a second. You're doing all these really fun, motivating games in your session and she's saying go and ready, set, go. And you're like, she's super excited. And then we bring the device into the classroom and now all of a sudden it's like, go to the bathroom. Maybe she doesn't want to go to the bathroom.
Right.
Go to lunch. Maybe she doesn't want, well, most kids want to go to lunch, but you see what I'm saying? Like if we start pairing it with things that aren't as exciting and motivating, we risk her being like, no, this isn't fun. This isn't cool. This isn't exciting. I don't, which we've already kind of primed her for that, right? She's already kind of like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. It sounds like with the device. So is there anything that's like really fun and exciting and motivating we could think about for the classroom that would, make sense? Even if it's just like, maybe going out during recess and bringing that toy. Is there anything that kind of pops into your head as like, oh, this would be really fun and engaging and motivating with the word go?
I think kind of like that makes a lot of sense. I think I need to find out more of what her actual classroom school day looks like, because I'm not really sure right now what in the classroom setting is super motivating. Other than I do have gathered that she does like to eat, so going to lunch might work. But other than that one time a day, I mean, yeah. But I think I'm trying to remember because at a certain point they don't get recess anymore, but I am thinking that in 6th grade, I think, because there was a playground at that school, so I would assume the lowest grade at least would be getting it. So I need to check into that. But yeah, I can, if she's getting that time or if there's like a free time of day or something like that. Yeah, I think I need to look more into what does her in-class school day look like to kind of get more ideas on that.